Hello everyone, today I want to show you a quick demonstration about how I draw these beautiful flowers, the flowers vase, using the Charles Reid technique of contour drawing. I try not to focus on all the details and I rather working on creating beautiful doodle lines that will just give me a guide reference for painting. The most important part really is when we are going to start painting because I don't try to paint everything at once. I try to create a little puddle first and then pick water from my cup and move the color with the water. That is why you are seeing that I create these little puddles and then bring in water from my cup. I move around these puddles of color or pigment, and that is really what creates the volume on the flowers or any objects. This is something that I learned from Charles Reid, from his technique, and I do it very purposely whenever I paint anything. It's kind of a technique that has, how can I say this, will mimic in a way what the Impressionists did in the past, and I believe so, and that is why I've loved it so much, and I've adapted this to the way I paint. So throughout the years, I've been using this technique and I've been teaching it more and more to better than going for the most realistic effect or details on my paintings. I go for the character, for the volume, for the movement of the color. That is basically what I want to do when I am painting. Well, this one reference, we painted it in the last watercolor class that I was teaching at the Matthews Library, at the Mint Hill Library from the Mecklenburg Libraries here in Charlotte. And it was so much fun. Everybody was, I believe, I believe so. Everybody was enjoying so much learning this Charles Reid technique, and I always make reference to it since it has always been a great tool for me for teaching watercolors. Well, let me keep going with showing you this demonstration. Throughout this very quick demonstration, you are seeing that I am creating these puddles of color or puddles of pigment that I then move with a clean brush loaded with water to create the volume. And whenever I need more color, I just dab a little bit more. All right, let me tell you about this one. When I want to create volume, like in the vase of the flowers, I create a stripe of pigment, like a stripe puddle, let's call it, and then bringing water from my jar, I walk on the side, and that is how I get the color moving. Really, this technique is the one that I always teach when I am teaching watercolors, and it's truly very helpful for everyone. Even if the students afterwards want to paint more realistic style, it always helps them to use this technique of creating a bottle of pigment and then bringing water from the jar and moving that color to create the effect that we are expecting. When I paint foliage, when I paint leaves, when I paint stems, I try to follow the movement of these elements. I don't just set the paint on the paper. I try to look at how these will move, even the stems, and that is how I create the lines. So I am not only dabbing color into this painting, I am trying to go for the movement reference of each one of the elements, in this case, the foliage, the flowers, and everything. Well, while I am adding darker colors, I am trying to add volume to this reference. The picture reference, I don't use it to completely mimic what I'm seeing or draw what I'm seeing. I really use it as a reference. This one step that you saw me doing, it was lifting some paint to create the light that is hitting one of the sides of the vase. That is what was going on. But while this video, I fast forwarded it because it really took me 35 minutes to complete this piece. I wanted to fast forward it to be 6 minutes so that you can more easily just take a look at the movements that I'm creating. at the mixtures I am creating of color, where I'm going to tell you something. When I want to create the darker color or of some of these colors, like the pink color, I mix the pink color with green, and that gives me the darker color that I used for creating the volume on some of the sides of these flowers. I just didn't want to miss telling you that, because you are seeing some of these mixtures that I am creating. Something that I always tell everyone before this video is coming to an end is that please remember, whenever you use greens, try to mix them with another color, preferably. Don't use them as the green color purely as you have them in your watercolor palette. Well, lastly, in this part of the video, I am trying to create the shadows in a cloth where this flower's vase is sitting. I hope you enjoyed this video very much, and whenever you want to join us in class, try to look for us in the Mecklenburg libraries. Bye!